It wasn't a little girl. I was camping with my husband and his family at a small, remote lake in New Mexico. There were about 10 people in our group and another group of 6 people in the next campsite. It was nighttime, and both groups were doing typical activities, making s'mores, having a few drinks, and telling stories, when we all heard what sounded like a little girl yelling out for help. Neither group had children with them, but we were all positive we were hearing a little girl, and we decided to search the area we heard the noises come from together. There was a field behind our campsites, and we all saw a very tall, pure white figure standing maybe 100 feet away from us in the field, making the noises. We all agreed that this thing looked maybe 6 feet tall, skinny, and wide as it can be. We made our way closer to investigate, but whatever it was that we saw started backing off as we got closer, and it disappeared into the trees. All night we continued to hear a little girl calling out for help as we tried to sleep. The unrest stopped. I was driving across country with my mom and sister when I was 16 and my sister was 20. It was late, but we were all rested and still alert. We were driving along an interstate and needed gas and a bathroom break, so we stopped at the only rest stop in 200 miles. There was a van full of teenagers on a road trip at the gas station, as well as a small gray car parked at the pump in front of us with 2 young men standing still outside of it. When we got there, everything felt wrong. We'd been on the road for days and seen many rest stops at night, and had never been afraid until then. My mom and sister went inside and I stayed in the car. I heard the teenagers say that they were creeped out and couldn't get the pump to work, and they left in a hurry. I was watching the car in front of us, and the 2 men had not moved at all. Not an inch. They weren't talking. They weren't on phones. They were just standing there, still a stone. My sister and mom came running out of the car, and when they got in, the 2 men slowly turned to look at us while not moving, or pivoting the rest of their bodies. And I swear to fucking shit, we all saw the same thing. They had eyes dark as pitch and empty. Truly empty. Not black, not reflecting any light at all, just a void. We sped out of there. It didn't stop until we were in the next city. The worst thing about the entire experience? We couldn't find the place on any map. We knew exactly which spot on the interstate to look, and we couldn't find it on Google Maps or any map we had. We even asked locals about the creepy gas station out on that stretch of a road and got only confused looks. We've traveled on that interstate, and there is no rest stop. It was good to see an old friend. When I was 37, I went to my high school reunion. I flew into the nearest airport and rented a car. The distance was about 35 miles through a very rural and almost abandoned part of the country. About 3 miles outside of town, I see someone on the side of the road, flagging me down. It turned out that it was one of the guys I had attended school with, Jim. Jim gets in the car and we start talking. I had not seen him in 20 years, but he still looked the same, maybe a little older. We get to town and I ask him if he wants to come to the VFW and have a drink. He says, "No, just take me home." Jim's parents had lived only a few blocks from my grandmother's house, and I turned into that direction, but he said to take him to the outskirts of town. There was a mobile home park out there, and I figured it was where he lived. When we reached the end of the turnoff, he said, "Just drop me here. It was good to see you again." And he walks off into the night. I got to the VFW, met some of my old classmates, We started to talk. As we were talking about who was coming to the reunion, I mentioned that I had just picked up Jim 3 miles east of town and had dropped him off. Everyone gets quiet. Even the guy singing karaoke stops and lays down the mic. My cousin goes white as the new t-shirt. Barb, Jim died on that curve 8 years ago. Rolled his car. We were all at his funeral, I was told. I started to feel really dizzy, and I went out to the car to take some deep breaths. There on the seat is a local newspaper printed 8 years previous, containing Jim's obituary. I still have the paper. Death came for him. I was standing in my parents' room, taking to my very sick dad at the time. He was dying of stage 4 cancer. I got the feeling something was behind me. I looked towards the doorway to the living room, and something about 4 feet and 6 inches, fully black, is peeking around the corner, with its hands on the door frame. I ran towards it, and it slid back around the door. When I got outside the doorway, there was nothing. My dad was completely confused when I stepped back in the room when I tell him. People who stayed at my house in my dad's final days claimed to have seen it. My mom saw the figure on multiple occasions, in multiple places until he passed away. We haven't seen it since. Evicted by a ghost. Shortly after college, I got married. We immediately moved into a basement apartment because that's all that was available within our budget. This place had a poltergeist, and my wife was terrified. Whatever resided there with us made it clear that it wanted to live alone. Dishes, glasses, and other items would fly off the shelf. My wife was hit several times. There was always an ominous feeling like we were being watched. At night, when we walked through the apartment in the dark, there would be insanely bright flashes of light that would illuminate the entire room. One night, while we were going to bed, as soon as my wife and I walked into the bedroom, we heard a voice from nowhere say, "Jim, move." My wife looked at me. I looked at her. I said loudly, "You've got it, bud." We moved out 2 days later and stayed with the family. The old lady who owned the place died a few months later, and the house was torn down. It is still an empty lot to this day, nothing but grass and a tree. I still drive by it every now and again,